Hi friends, I'm Em. Welcome back to my channel, and today we are going to be doing my wrap up for everything that I read in November. Alright, if you've been here for a minute, you are probably really tired of hearing me say that I want to read less in the month because I tend to get overwhelmed when I read too many books. I finally freaking did it. I read 14 books in November, which feels like a reasonable amount of books and not excessive. So yay for that. Did I like what I read? Generally, yes. Let's do the stats real quick though, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty. 3 of them were in audio, and then the rest was physical. I didn't read any ebooks this month. And I have physical representations of all the books I read, but I'll earmark which ones were pretty much exclusively audio. I generally do some sort of hybrid reading for everything. So while a majority of these were a hybrid read, Storygraph doesn't have an option for that yet. So there are very few books that I read with just my eyeballs. So my average rating was a 4.12 star. And I feel like I'm going to have to reevaluate my rating system because that feels really high. It says I had 2 5-star reads. Did I have 2 5-star reads? That tracks. I had 2 5. So I had 2 5 stars, 3 4.5 stars, 2 4.25 stars, 2 4 stars, 3 3.5 stars, 1 3-star, and 1 book that I did not rate. So those are your stats. 3 of the books I read were from the library, and everything else I either already had on Libro FM or was from my unread shelf. So yeah, that's pretty good. I would like to credit Clear Your Shit with me getting that much of my physical TBR read, because that's been a really great motivator to work my way through all my books. So anyways, let's get started. I'm going to go in chronological order of what I read this month, just because I haven't done that order for a while. And we're going to start off with Ocean's Echo by Everina Maxwell. This was my self-destructing TBR book for November, and I didn't love it. There was a logic component to this book that I just couldn't buy into. This takes place in fictional, science fiction universe, and we have these 2 types of people in this world. We have architects, which are people who can control other people's actions, and then we have readers who are basically empaths and can feel people's feelings and that sort of thing. And in this world, Everina Maxwell is really trying to convince us that these people believe that the readers are dangerous and the architects are just fine, and I could not with that logic. I also felt like this romance wasn't really earned, and it was super slow burn, and I just didn't see them falling in love with each other like I did in Winter's Orbit, which Winter's Orbit I really loved. Winter's Orbit was a 5-star read for me, and I think this one I gave like 3.25, or maybe it was one of my 3 stars. Anyways, I just didn't enjoy it the way I enjoyed Winter's Orbit, and I actually think I'm going to be unhauling this one because I am not going to reread it because I just didn't have a good time with it. It was sad to start off the month like that, and I am also continuing to be insecure about my ability to pick books that for myself that I will enjoy. All right, next I read The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. This was one of my library books that I read, and I had a good time with this. It's not my favorite of T. Kingfisher's horror. Not saying I didn't enjoy it. I still really enjoyed it. I had a good time with it. I was happy to be here while I was here, but just out of the 4, it's not my favorite. Hence why it is just a library book, and I'm not going to be buying my own copy. I also don't know if you read horror, do you reread horror? I've been trying to answer that for myself, debating whether or not to buy horror that I really loved, because I don't know that I would reread it once I know what the twist is at the end. So I don't know. Yeah, if you're a horror reader, let me know. Do you reread your favorite horror books, or do you just have them on your shelf to remind yourself of how much you loved them? But anyways, this is a portal book where Carrot, is that her name? Yeah, Carrot and her friend Simon are taking care of Carrot's uncle's curiosity museum, and they discover a hole in the wall that shouldn't be there, and realize that through the hole in the wall there is a portal to like this in-between world that has all these monsters in it, and it was very creepy while they are in the world. I don't find T. Kingfisher's brand of horror to be scary for me, but I always enjoy her humor and the atmosphere and the interpersonal relationships between her characters. I have such a good time with that. And I think if you're looking for portal kind of eldritch, is that the word? Horror with like creatures and like, I haven't read Lovecraft, but like I think kind of along that line, then I would definitely recommend this, especially if you're looking for horror that may be spooky or creepy but isn't necessarily outright scary. Though there is like body horror in this, so look out for that. I also read book 2 in the Sinister Summer. This is Vampiric Vacation by Kirsten White. This is a middle grade series about a trio of siblings whose parents drop them off at the beginning of book 1 with their aunt Sophronia, and everything is very mysterious and secretive, and they are solving a mystery in each book at a different location. The first book they were at a water park, and then this book they are at a spa. And things are not the way you would imagine them to be. Like if you think about what a spa would be like in your imagination, the spa that these kids go to is not the same as what they have imagined. And I am still really loving this series. I love how funny it is. I love the siblings. We're specifically focusing on the twins in these books, and I found the writing less enjoyable in this one as in book 1. Kirsten White really leans on the similes pretty hard at the beginning of the book in the way she's describing things, but I really liked how she talked about anger, and especially like when you're angry at somebody you love. I like how she tackled that, and I liked the mystery, and I'm really excited to see where this series continues to go in the next 2 books. And there's an individual mystery in each book, but there's also this overarching mystery of where their parents have gone and why they've been dropped off with this aunt that they never knew beforehand, and there's like a supernatural aspect going on with their aunt. So I'm really hoping the reveal for all these secrets lives up to the suspense that Kirsten White is building up in the first 2 books so far anyways. I just realized I'm not giving ratings, but that's okay. Y'all don't need the star rating, right? I can just tell you whether or not I enjoyed it. That's enough, right? All right, the next one I read is The Surviving Sky by Kritika H. Rao. This is a library book that I read because I'm trying to be better about using my library on series that I'm not sure I'm going to like. But this is a debut, and this was a very ambitious debut. This is a fantasy set on what I assume is our Earth, but climate change has gotten to the point where there are Earth rages, basically earth storms all the time, and earthquakes and hurricanes and tornadoes, and Earth is uninhabitable for humans any longer. And so the people have built these floating cities or ashrams that are held aloft by architects, which is their magic system. And these people that are born with this ability to do magic can influence plant life, and so they use plants to build the architecture of their city and to keep everything floating. And then the architects are also able to tell when the earth rages have settled enough that the ashrams can land temporarily before needing to lift up again. And in this book we're following a husband and a wife, and the husband is an architect and the wife is an archaeologist, and there's quite a class difference between the architects and people who are not architects, and the wife is really fighting for a better balance of those class differences. And I really liked how messy their marriage was and their relationship. They're both varying degrees of unlikable. They have their moments. There are times where I was like, oh no, that's a good point. And then a few chapters later, I'd be like, oh no, she had a good point too. And so I kind of went back and forth. I did feel like the ending got a little complicated. I'm not quite sure that I understand the reveal at the end. I read a couple reviews that said there was a lot of Hindu philosophy in this book, and I just have a very poor knowledge of Hindu in general, and so the philosophy stuff went right over my head, but I still really enjoyed her character work in this world, and I just saw the cover reveal for book 2, and it is equally stunning, and I'm intrigued enough to continue on with the series because I want to see how she grows out this world. I want to see how Rao's writing grows as she gets another book under her belt, and I think this is supposed to be a trilogy, and I'm definitely invested. I think I really am gonna see this trilogy through to the end, and then I'll probably decide whether or not I want to actually own this series based on how the whole thing goes. But if you are looking for fantasy that does something really different, that's set in a different world than we've seen before, I really, especially in I think a time in books where so much of the books I see, the covers look the same, the titles are the same, the plots all sound the same. I am very much having an extra appreciation for books that are original and are doing something super different than what the rest of the popular genre is doing. So if you're also looking for a book that, while it may not be perfect, is definitely doing something different, I would highly recommend The Surviving Sky. All right, and then after that, I read The Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. This was one that I did all on audio because I had it from Libro FM. And gothic fairy tale is not for me. I think I have decided. It's just, I want to like it. It sounds like it's something I should like, but it does not work for me. There were parts of this I really liked. I really liked the character voice at the beginning, but so much of this book hanged on everybody miscommunicating, and I can't do a whole book where that is so much of all the conflict and all the tension and all the whatever. It can't just be because people aren't talking to each other. I can handle that in little increments in a book, but that can't just be the whole book for me. I need more. And I think I've just decided that Alex E. Harrow's writing is too, I don't even know what the word I want. I think Alex E. Harrow is just not the author for me. Even though have been books of hers that I've enjoyed, I think I just need to let her go. I just need to let go of that FOMO of people reading and loving her books. She just doesn't work for me, and that's okay. I think I definitely get why people really love Alex E. Harrow. I get why her books are popular. I totally understand why somebody might absolutely love Starling House. I can see it. I understand it. It's just not for me. All right, so then this book I also did mostly on audiobook, but I had already owned a physical copy as well from back when I was a bookseller. This book is kind of old, I think. Oh, it came out in 2020. Yeah, okay, that feels old. So I was still bookselling in 2020. So I had this back from my bookselling days. And, I started off, this is middle grade, in case the cover didn't make that obvious. I started off really loving this book. It's got kind of a Roald Dahl style of storytelling, and it's about this man named Ebenezer Tweezer who has been alive for 500 years, and he has this beast that lives in the attic of his house that he gives the beast things to eat, and then the beast will grant Ebenezer's wishes. And then also once a year he gives Ebenezer this elixir that prolongs his life. So he brings the beast all these things, but the beast over the years has gotten this more picky appetite. I don't know. He wants more unusual things. And so one of the things that the beast decides he wants to eat that he's never had before is a child. And so Ebenezer goes about trying to find a really unlikable child to feed to the beast. And the child that he finds is Bethany. And so Bethany's an orphan, and so Ebenezer adopts her. And so there's a lot of humor in this book that was really funny, and I was having such a good time with it. And then the fat phobia started, and it was so unnecessary and so blatant, and so that really, it was really unfortunate that the author felt the need to put in fat phobic stuff and, you know, villainizing fatness in the language that he chose to use. And so I would not recommend it anymore, sadly. I just can't even explain how disappointed I was that that was such a big element of this book towards the end. So that was unfortunate, and I will be unhauling it because I don't need my children reading that. The next book up is the one that I left unrated, and it is The Word for World is Forest by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is a novella that she won a Hugo Award for in 1976, I believe. And she wrote this novella in response to the Vietnam War because she was a pretty staunch protester of the Vietnam War. And she was living in the United States and going to all these protests, and then she moved to London for a year, and I can't remember why. I don't even know if she says why in the introduction. And, you know, there was no protesting, there was no social movement against the Vietnam War in London. And so she wrote this novella in that time, since she had no other outlet to show her disapproval, dislike of the Vietnam War. And so she has a lot of things to say about oppression and about colonization. And so it's not a fun read. It's not a easy read. I would say the writing is pretty dense. There's a lot of stuff to dig through. Sometimes the characters felt really through the whole thing, the characters felt really two-dimensional, but sometimes that two-dimensionality felt so real and honest and valid. And then there are other times where it felt like a caricature of a type. So it was really, it was interesting. It was interesting to how much this still resonates, especially with the war going on between Israel and Palestine right now. Like that it all felt so prevalent still. And I don't know if it's sad that we're just continuing to make the same decisions over and over again, or if it's reassuring that people almost 70 years ago, are still dealing with the issues that we're dealing with now. I mean, I don't know. It's just, I think it's just sad. I don't think it's reassuring. I think it's sad that we can't just let people live and take care of each other and give people the things they need to live their lives. But, you know, apparently that's a controversial opinion depending on who you talk to. All right, and then the next book I finished was Out There Screaming, an anthology of new black horror edited by Jordan Peele, and I liked this so much. I am normally not a anthology person, and short story anthologies are really hard for me to get through, but I thought this was put together so wonderfully. You know, it starts with an N.K. Jemisin story that is just absolutely fantastic, and it ends with a Tochi Yonabuchi story that just knocked me out of the freaking park. Knocked it out of, and it was so good. It was so good. It was by far the best story in here. And then there were a bunch of stories in the middle that I just absolutely adored. There were a few that, there was one that I DNF'd because just the way the story structure was, it just didn't work for me, and I got confused, and then I couldn't couldn't recalibrate myself. But in general, this was such a successful reading moment for me. It took me a really long time to read it, but I think that was good. I think the amount of time I gave this, and I would only read a couple stories at a time. So I tried to give this anthology room to breathe and to really absorb each story before I dove into the next. And I think that really helped me out. So I would really recommend this. I think this is such a fun collection of horror. Not to say that there are not content warnings galore. Some of these stories get really dark, and some of them have a lot of body horror. So like, I definitely check like content warnings if there are things that are no-goes for you. But in general, like, absolutely fantastic. And then I also finished the Up and Under series by A. Deborah Baker. I listened to Under the Smokescreen Sky, and this is book 4. This is a adult fairy tale quartet novella. This is A. Deborah Baker is Shauna McGuire, and this is the children's book that is referenced in Middle Game. And this is one where I think I like the idea of this series more than I actually like the series. I think we're coming back around to, as much as I want to like fairy tale styled stories, generally they don't work for me. I would be interested in going back and reading this whole series as one big book. I think maybe having to wait a year in between installments might have lessened the emotional impact. But I really do think Shauna McGuire's writing in this book is beautiful. I think if you like her writing in the Wayward Children series, then this series would definitely has a similar rhythm and cadence and the things that she's wanting to say. And you don't have to read Middle Game to read this series. But I'm kind of sad the series is over. And I think these covers are absolutely stunning. So whoever Tor.com hired to do the art, like, excellent job. They're just superior. I read volume 4 of Witch Hat Atelier, and I liked this volume a lot. We're focusing on a different witch than our main character, Coco, but it was fun to focus on somebody else, and it ended on quite a cliffhanger, so I do need to get volume 5 from my library sooner rather than later. But in this series, it's a manga series, we're following Coco, who is training to be a witch, and the other girls that are at witch school with her. And then I read A Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent by Marie Brennan, and I freaking loved this book. It was so good. This is told in memoir style, obviously, and Lady Isabella Trent is telling us about her childhood, her coming out essentially, and then her husband's and hers first expedition to study dragons. And it was great. And I loved it, and I had such a good time with it, and I liked it so much more than Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which makes me so happy. So if you want also like memoir style story with academic lady, and I wouldn't say her husband is ridiculous, but I don't know, I just loved it. It was such a good time, and had a surprising emotional impact at the end that I was not prepared for, and I cannot wait to read the next book in this series. And then the other audiobook I listened to is This Is Going to Hurt, Secret Diaries of a Medical Resident by Adam Kay. This was such a surprise. I just kind of picked this up to fill in the gaps in my audiobook listening, and I really, really liked it. Adam Kay narrates it himself, and it's darkly funny, like a lot of hospital humor, or I guess gallows humor is maybe how you would describe it, and just it really highlights how toxic it is to work in the medical field, just with what is expected out of doctors and how hard we expect medical professionals to work, and how they're making these life or death decisions on just the brink of exhaustion all the time, and that's not sustainable, and we need to like do better in holding these, you know, CEOs and the people that are are raking in all this money from the hospitals but don't have any idea of what it's actually like to save people's lives. Anyways, I really enjoyed it. It was really fun. Dark but fun and weird and gross, which apparently are my buzzwords. But and then I had a friend say that he has a like Christmas edition of this where he talks about specifically Christmas stories from the hospital. So I might be picking that up because this was such a successful time. And then I read System Collapse by Martha Wells. This is the most recent installment in the Murderbot series, and you know, I love me some Murderbot. Murderbot is the best. I gave this 5 stars in the moment, and I should probably lower that down because there are, after the fact, it's like, oh, there are some things that maybe wasn't the best Murderbot. But this is very much felt like a filler. We pick up right after Network Effect, so I would recommend, if it's been a while since you read Network Effect, I would recommend rereading that and then going straight into this, because even though I reread Network Effect not that long ago, I was still confused for a good first chunk of this book. It took me a while to remember who all the new characters were, what exactly had happened. Murderbot's also a little bit of an unreliable narrator at the beginning of the book, so that could definitely have contributed to it. If I was going to lower it down, I don't know, I might do like a 4 or 4.25, just because some of it was a little redundant, but like in my heart, I can't rate Murderbot lower than a 4. So I don't know if I'm going to change that rating or if I'm just going to let it stand. Just for nostalgia and comfort vibes. Will say I highly recommend the audiobooks in general. Kevin R. Free is fantastic as Murderbot's voice, like really just absolutely the best. And then the last book I read was Refusing Compulsory Sexuality, A Black Asexual Lens on Our Sex-Obsessed Culture by Sharonda J. Brown. This was my other 5-star. This was absolutely fantastic. This is just about how the way our society talks about sex and considers sex and how it ties into rape culture and white supremacy and patriarchy and all the harmful things that exist in our society. And if we could just chill out about it, so many things would be better. They also talk about how like sex feeds into productivity culture, which I found really interesting, especially when you get into like reproduction. And anyways, there's just so much to unpack in this book, and I thought it was so interesting. And clearly I highlighted the you-know-what out of it. So it is more of an academic book, but I felt like it was also really easily consumable. Like, Sharonda J. Brown is not talking down to you, and their writing style is just it's so easy to read, and I just highly recommend this book. It was so good. So that is the end of this wrap up. I don't know why I talked longer with 14 books than I do when I have 24 books, but that's how it is. So if you have made it to the end of this episode, if you've made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching and spending your precious time with me. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or your week or wherever you are in time when you're watching this. If you would like to leave a comment, please tell me about your November reading. I would love to hear all the things. I would love to hear your favorites, your disappointments, books that you think should be dropped into a bottomless cavern. Tell me all the things. If you want to leave a comment but don't have anything in particular that you want to share, let's do a robot emoji, and I will talk to you all in the next one. Bye!